Hello everyone. I wanted to talk a little bit about the introduction to measurements in the laboratory and go through making some of these measurements. So we'll start with part A, the measurement of regular geometric shapes. So we'll have a rectangle and a circle. There is no need to indicate a shape sheet code ID for this recording. Let's go ahead and look at the objects we'll be measuring. So we have the rectangle at the top, the circle at the bottom, and the circle we'll be measuring the outside diameter of. I wanted to also say a few things about the measuring device we'll be using. So we have a ruler here that we'll be using. So you'll notice that we're indicating units of millimeters. Millimeters would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. When we do this measurement today, I would like you to use units of centimeters. We will still be using this same scale, but what you'll do instead is you'll have centimeters, you'll have 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, etc. And then the little marks in between would be tenths of a centimeter. So 1.1 up to this longer one is 1.5, and then all the way up to 2.0. We will also be guessing the last digit of the measurement. So on this scale, we have a mark for, say, 1.1, 1.2. So that is not the last digit you'll be guessing. You would be guessing a digit after that. So as we go through and make these measurements, make sure that you are using units of centimeters and that you are guessing the last digit. So the next thing we'll do is get this in place in order to make the measurements. So this is our first measurement. This is the length of the rectangle. So make sure you're writing down the measurement there. Again, make sure that you're guessing your last digit. This is our next measurement. This is the width of the rectangle. Again, please remember to guess the last digit. And here we have the measure for the diameter of the circle. The camera is adjusting a little bit, so we'll just wait on that to come into focus. Remember that we are here using the outside diameter. Also, again, as always, please remember to guess the last digit. I want to talk now about Part B, measuring the mass of solids. For this recording, we will not discuss Table 1, the mass using a triple beam balance. So we will skip over Table 1, and we'll talk about Table 2, weighing by difference. So we will measure the mass of an empty beaker, and then we will have the mass of that same beaker plus we're going to add something to it. We're going to actually, instead of using sugar today, we will be using sand, but you'll be making the measurement for mass for each of these. So let's talk about the balance first of all. So here we're showing the balance, and the balance has a lid. I'm going to open the lid, and you'll notice there is some white paper there. The reason for that, I'm going to go and take it off. We normally don't have that, but because of the shiny metal, I put this on here to decrease the glare when we make the measurement, so it will be easier to see the display. So what we can do is we can incorporate the mass of that piece of paper into just the background of the balance itself. We do that by pressing the 0 button, so I'm going to press that. And this will give us a 0 reading, and that 0 includes everything from the balance plate to that piece of paper. So anything we put on here will be the measurement that we're making. So let's go ahead and take the beaker and put this on. I will say that we don't normally have this piece of paper on when we would do this in the lab. It could lead to some errors if we're not careful. But for today, what we're doing, it should be fine, and it will make it easier for you to see what we're measuring. So put the beaker on the balance, and you see the mass there on the display. That will be what you would write for the mass of the beaker. And then we'll take that off, and as I mentioned, we're going to add some sand to this instead of the sugar. So there's a little bit of sand, and you know what, it looks like we are a little bit off now, so I'm going to re-zero that. I can tell you what probably happened there. I was probably too close to the balance when I did that, and some of the sand dust might have interfered with the measurement. So let me go ahead and put this back on. So that is the mass of the sand plus the beaker. So you'll write that down for that second part. Next, we'll look at part C, the volumes of liquids and solids, and we'll look specifically at table 1. So we'll be measuring the volume of liquid water using a few different methods. There is one thing that will be a little bit different from what is showing in this table. Instead of a 100 milliliter graduated cylinder and a 10 milliliter graduated cylinder, we are just going to have a 50 milliliter graduated cylinder. So we will only be making 3 measurements here instead of 4. Let's go ahead and take a look at the objects we'll be measuring with. So we have 3 things here. We have the graduated cylinder over here. We have the beaker right here. And then this is the tip of the burette, which is a very long device, and we'll be taking a closer look at that when we get to that measurement. So we'll be going through making measurements with each of these in turn, where we will focus in on where the liquid is located as we make that measurement. Before we do that, though, I do want to go ahead and review one thing about making these measurements. So I'm going to go back to the start of this document, and we will discuss how to measure the volume of a liquid. And this is on, I believe, the second page of your lab if you want to read through this in more detail. When we measure the volume of a liquid, there's one thing that we have to be aware of, and that is for the a liquid, especially water in a container, the liquid itself is not flat. It has a curve to it. So we can see that in this drawing. We're showing how the liquid will curve down. So there's an upper edge where it's curving up to the edge of the container, and then it's also curving down to the bottom as in the middle. So we need to have a consistent way of making this measurement, and the way we do this is we measure from the bottom. So we measure the volume of a liquid by measuring from the bottom of the meniscus. And as always with any kind of a measurement, we need to guess the last digit. So here we're showing, in this case, it appears that this bottom is exactly on the mark for 30. Well, we have 30 here, then we have 31, 32, etc. So if it's exactly on the 30, we need to guess the last digit. So it's 30, 31, so the next digit would be 0.0, 0.1, 0.2, etc. Exactly on that mark, we would call that 30.0. So that's how we would make that measurement. Okay, so here we are making the measurement for the beaker. So you can see where the water level is. Look again at the bottom of the meniscus, and you have marks there for 10, 20, 30, 40. So be sure to be guessing the last digit for those measurements. Here we have the measure for the graduated cylinder. Again, we are not doing a 10 or a 100. This is a 50 milliliter graduated cylinder. We have a mark here for 20 milliliters. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a mark for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then a mark for 30. So be aware of the marks Remember to guess the last digit. Remember to read from the bottom of the meniscus. I wanted to say a little bit about this last device before we make the measurement for it. So here we're zoomed out a little bit. This is the burette. The burette is a long, very thin glass tube, and I'm going to kind of scroll up here. So way up here at the top, we have the top, and you might be able to see that, you might not, but the very top marking there is 0. And then as we go down, the numbers are going to get bigger. And we'll talk about this again a bit more when we go to make the measurement. The burette is held in place. This is called a burette holder. So there are 2 clamps. They need to both be secured onto the glass itself. And then that is connected to a stand with a heavy base. Let's see if we can get picture of the base. The heavy base there will keep it in place. So this is the burette. So the main thing I want you to understand related to that is that we are starting with 0 at the top, and then as we go down, the numbers are going to get bigger. And we'll again come back to that in a minute. The burette is used to add a liquid very precisely. And so how we use this is we start at the top with a small number, and then as we add, we get a larger number. And you can see at the bottom here, we have this part is called the stopcock. And so we can open and close this to add a very small amount of liquid at a time. We will be using this in another lab later this semester. For today, we want to be able to make the measurement for volume of a burette. Okay, so here's our measure for the volume of a burette. Remember that we are starting at a small number at the top and working to bigger numbers as we go down. So right here we have this longer one that goes all the way across is 42. There's another one right in here that goes part way across is 42.5. And then down here we have one that goes again all the way across is 43. In between those we have some marks for 42.1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And then the 5 is a bit longer, 6, 7, 8, 9. So a couple things here. Remember to again be measuring from the bottom of the meniscus, and then also to be guessing the last digit. Next, we'll be measuring the volume of a regular solid block, and we'll be filling this into table 2. So let's go ahead and take a look at the block itself. So here we're showing the block and the ruler that we'll be using. Again, we will be measuring this in units of centimeters. So it says millimeters, but we want to do 1, 2, 3, 4 centimeters, for example, and then the other marks would be 1.1, 1.2, etc. So here is the first measurement. This is a measure of the length of the block. So go ahead and write that one down. Here is the second measurement. This is the measure of the width of the block. And this is the final measurement. This is the measure of the height of the block. Finally, we have part D, where we will find the density of water. Here we will be combining some of the measurements we made in earlier parts, so we have measures of mass and volume together. So we'll be measuring the mass of the empty dry graduated cylinder, the mass again with some water present, and then finally the volume of the water in that graduated cylinder. For the third line, you will have to do a calculation to find that. So refer back to when we previously measured the mass in order to determine how to do that calculation. So here again is the balance. So we'll open the lid, and we can see that it is zeroed. So we will put the graduated cylinder on the balance. Okay, so you're seeing the mass there. That is the mass of the empty graduated cylinder. And now we will go ahead and add some water to this graduated cylinder. And then we'll put the graduated cylinder back on the balance. And you're seeing there, that is the mass of the graduated cylinder plus the water. And here we can see the water that's in there, and next we'll be measuring the volume of that water. Okay, so here we have the mass, I'm sorry, we did the mass already. Here we have the volume of the water in the graduated cylinder. So the longer line down here is 20 milliliters. This somewhat longer line is 25. And then you'd have 26, 27, 28, 29. And then the longer line up here is 30. So remember to measure from the bottom of the meniscus. And also remember to be guessing the last digit.